This program is brought to you by DJ's Goalpost Sports Bar and Grill.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Pippen Dodds Packers podcast. Tom Pippins with John Dodds, the Packers historian, one of the all-time greats. And speaking of which, the gentleman I'm looking at, Don Medovich, he was Aaron Jones with 4.5 speed before Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. He, of course, is our feature sponsor here from DJ's Goalpost in Menomonee Falls, and we are delighted to have him with us. Don, thank you, my friend, for joining the team. You are the MVP.
Well, Tom, thank you very much for bringing me in on this.
And we have an outstanding guest, again, courtesy of John Dodds. He knows everybody, including John Kane. He's going to talk about their connection. He is a major Vikings fan, and he is as knowledgeable as they come when it comes to the good folks up there in Minnesota. JD, as always, take it away. Kick it off.
Great. I've known John Kane since 1983. He was a year behind me in law school. And when it comes to his history of the Minnesota Vikings, I can't think of anyone who knows more. Big game coming up on Sunday. And so I wanted to bring John on to get his take. When I was in law school, I wrote for the law school newspaper Discovery. I wrote sports articles. Then when I graduated, John fit right in, and he wrote sports articles for Discovery. And I remember he put Bud Lee's picture that they used in the Sentinel, and he used that, and he just put Bud Kane. So he put that right there. So he had that. And then I remember about 15 years ago, Norman Shadd was a great columnist, one of the funniest columnists. I know he's my dad's favorite, where he'd do a tongue-in-cheek article about sports. He takes sports so seriously. He doesn't take it seriously. And he would always encourage, in his nationally syndicated show, he'd always encourage people to write in and make funny comments or whatever. And if he liked them, he'd take the top 5 and he would publish them in the national newspaper. And I always wanted to be included in that. And I thought. And finally, I thought of just before just before a March Madness one year, ESPN was hyping up their rivalry week. Then they were hyping up their judgment week. Then they were hyping up their championship week. So I sent a letter to Norman Shadd. I said, and he called himself the man. So I said, "Dear the man, when you're calculating or when you're figuring out your March brackets, do you put more emphasis on ESPN's rivalry week, ESPN's championship week, or ESPN's judgment week?" And he liked that, posted it up, and I get calls from all over the country when it said John Dodds, Milwaukee. All of my friends from all over the country called in, and John called and said, "I've been trying to get on this. I've been trying to get on this for 5 years. How did you do it?" And I said, "I hit one of them." But then about a month later, "John, you made it. What did you say?"
It was kind of the highlight of my journalistic career, John. Thanks everybody for having me. It's a real pleasure. I asked him if he could have any advice he could give to Andrew Luck about failing to meet expectations. To share how long ago that was before Andrew Luck was drafted. Now he's, as you guys know, he's retired. So I still have the letter from Norman, though. That's for sure.
You would get the letter from Norman Shadd, and he included a dollar bill, and his secretary was named Shirley. And if he liked what you said, he'd just say, "Pay the man, Shirley." And he sent a little letter with a dollar bill. So I have that thing framed in my house right now. So, and then John I called in to congratulate you on making the grade. And you said that, never forget that, you said that you felt like Buzz Aldrin to my Neil Armstrong.
Right. I was the second guy on the moon. It was still a good honor, but not quite top shelf.
That's right. Big game coming up this Sunday, and it's for goodness sakes, let's get off of this COVID for 2 seconds and start focusing on football. There was the Kansas City game the other night. They won big, and now it's the Viking game against the Packers. From Minnesota's standpoint, how do you view this?
Well, if there was ever a year that the Vikings needed some preseason games, this was it as far as defense goes. They're going to be playing against a Hall of Fame quarterback with at least two guys who have never played before. The corners have departed. They've got new cornerbacks playing. There's going to be a new slot corner, and at least 2 to 3 of those guys are going to be rookies. So that to me is probably the big thing, is the fact they lost a preseason. So no one knows if these guys can cover anybody. And as I mentioned, it's the wrong guy to have your first game against, I think.
Yeah, watching Zimmer, your coach, up close, he's a real hard-nosed guy, and he loves to beat the Packers. I've interviewed him up close at his coaching conferences, and my read on him is that he has tough training camps. He has tackling. These guys are ready. They're midseason ready now, as opposed to Green Bay. If you're going to play Green Bay, always play them in September, because they're kind of resting the guys. They don't want to get injured. And is my take right? Does Zimmer really have tough training camps, or is he eased up this year?
I think this year was probably more like what you've described, John, where the lack of being able to play anybody forced them to have more live practices, more live type scrimmages, where he wanted to, at least probably the last Friday before the camp broke, was to have what would be a simulated game in US Bank, so the rookies could get used to what the lights were like, what it looked like in there. So I think you're right. It's probably been a bigger hitting camp than a lot of other times they've had, where they've had the chance to have preseason games. And there's a lot of questions because of that. So I think you hit it right on the spot.
When I look at the Viking defense, I'm always impressed up the middle. In baseball, they always say catcher, shortstop, second base, center field. You build up the middle. It really seems like that is what the Vikings do. I mean, the last year, and they've lost him, but they had Linval Joseph, the big tackle. But behind him, they have two great linebackers. They have Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr. And if you want to mess with the Packer quarterbacks, you blitz up the A gap right around the center, on either side of the center. And I remember Ron Wolf years ago, I think it was the 94 draft, John Randall would get into Brett Favre so quickly on the 3-step drop and push the pocket in his face that they drafted Aaron Taylor first round from Notre Dame in the 94 draft just to stop him. And it seems like the Vikings always are competitive against the Packers because they have Kendricks and Barr who can blitz up the middle, and it's extremely effective.
Yeah, I think you hit it right in the head. And as you mentioned, Joseph too, he kind of fell into that trap that Everson Griffin was falling into, where those two guys were kind of getting old at the same time. I mean, great players in their day, but you hit 32, 33 on the defensive line, and there needs to be a change of character. So Shamar Stevens will take over for Linval Joseph, who's he had a lot of great years with Minnesota. But you're right, you have two good linebackers, and then behind them you have Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris, who are two really good safeties. But again, with them, the question is who plays behind those two safeties. So you're right, it's a question of a lot of wondering about what can happen if something goes wrong with those guys in their health. But I'd like to see Barr be a little more dynamic. Here's a guy that is an outside linebacker out of Central Casting, but I'd like to see him make a few more plays, more big plays, because as you may recall, he was basically ticketed for the New York Jets a couple of years ago, changed his mind at the last minute, and you're always kind of waiting for that huge play that he would make. So yeah, the front seven, you can rely on those guys a lot. It's what's behind them that Viking fans worry about.
Of course, the Packers have questions on the right side of the offensive line. John's good friend, Brian Balaga, is gone, of course. Don Matovich, as a fan, how do you feel about just having Packers football back in the midst of this pandemic and the sports world set upside down?
Well, being a bar owner and an ex-football player, I'm really happy that football's back. Like you said, it's a turmoil. And I want to see Ricky Wagner and what he can do for replacing Blaga, due to the fact that he's from Wisconsin and he went to Nathan Hale High School and he went to the University of Wisconsin. I just want to see him play. I don't even care about any of the other Packers, only because my son played against them, and I want to see how he holds up and if it was a good choice for the Packers or if it wasn't a good choice to bring him in to try to replace Blaga. Because the story is Blaga's a better offensive lineman, but the Ricky is a good quality. At one time, he was one of the highest paid offensive linemen in the NFL, or at least in a tackle position. So I'm interested to see what happens. I always like Minnesota Green Bay game, because more Minnesota Viking fans stay home and more Packer games get to go to Minnesota. I hope I didn't make anybody mad, John.
Well, at least back in the day they did, right? Are you going to have fans there, John? I know the Packers, of course, first two home games are not going to have fans. They had about 17,000 the other night in Kansas City for the Chiefs and Texans.
Yeah, what I read is the Minnesota rule is you can have 250 people in a facility, even if it holds 70,000 like theirs does. But the Vikings have said 250 people doesn't pay off to open it, so there's going to be nobody there. It'll be like a scrimmage type setting, which it'll be interesting to see how that works. That's for sure.
You bet.
Don, in terms of making people mad, I think if you weren't a bar owner, you'd be a diplomat at the UN. So I don't think you'd make anybody mad at all.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask this question then, because
Sure.
you are a Minnesota Viking fan. Have you ever heard of a good friend of mine named Phil Micek?
That one slides by me. I'm not familiar with that name.
Okay, so what I want to tell you is that during the strike year, Phil had a friend up there playing already that he went to Platteville with. And during the strike year, Phil was offered to go to a couple different places. Well, he elected to go and play in Minnesota. And he was a defensive end for what's called the Racing Raiders.
Okay.
And we all got a chance to do something. And Phil picked Minnesota. And actually, I think he's 6'7", but he went up there. And like you were talking about the hitting hard in practice and stuff, back then it was the same way, because that's how he made a name for himself up there, to the point where they actually said, you're an engineer, you worked for Rockwell. He said it, well, he paid for my college. I don't know if I want to try to play the whole season. They offered him a contract. They said, if you come on Thursday, practice Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you'll be able to play on Sundays. He didn't take the offer, but his friend from Platteville played for 3 years, and his name was Mike Jeske, and he played when Alan Page was playing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I just wanted to know if you ever heard that name. He actually went on to play in Canada. He also played in the Arena Football League, but he played mainly for the Racing Raiders, and he was a phenomenal athlete.
Excellent. That's great.
Yeah.
Serbian Stallion, John. He's always got a connection. He's just like you.
That's right. Alan Page was such a good player.
Magical.
Alan Page was such a good player that the referees would allow offensive linemen to hold him. Otherwise, he would just totally dominate the game. So
Yeah.
he was one heck of a player. John, Daniel Hunter is out. To talk about his injury and what he means. He's a very good pass rusher, and he puts extreme pressure on Packer offensive tackles. Could be a weak position for Green Bay, at least at the beginning of the season, due to losing Balaga, and then Ricky Wagner hurting his arm in training camp, and Turner hurting his knee.
Yeah, as far as talking about the injury goes, that was really another product of really lack of access to what was going on, because it was initially described as some sort of tweak, although no one ever said where it was. Then one day became the next, and he never practiced, and then he ends up on IR for the new rules are 3 weeks. So who knows what it is? Only they know, apparently, and apparently right now you don't have to say much more. So what they'll do is they'll take number 95, Odenigbo, and put him on in Hunter's spot. But this is a big loss. I mean, this is an all-pro player in a situation where you'd like to have things you can count on, and he's not going to be there for 3 games. It's a big loss to them.
Turning attention to the offense, it seems like the the key to Minnesota would be their running game. Cook is a great, great back. And it seems like the question is who dominates this game? The best run stuffer the Packers I've maintained over the last really 15 years is Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is up over Dallas 21-3, if he leads them 21-3, now Ezekiel Elliott's not going to run as much. So the best run stuff for Green Bay has is Rodgers. But on the other hand, if Green Bay doesn't get that lead early in the game, then Ezekiel Elliott of Dallas would run. Same with Cook. It seems like Cook can get a lot of running yardage, but if Green Bay's ahead early, it's not going to mean as much.
That's certainly correct. And Minnesota, the stats are they're the most heavily dependent play action team in the league. And as you point out, when you're down 14 or 17 points, nobody cares about play action at that stage. That's the basis of a lot of their offense. And if that threat isn't there, then you go back to an attack that's based on Cousins and Thielen, and now you don't have Diggs. So again, it's two young players that have to come up and play, but for the third time, there's no preseason. So I don't know if Justin Jefferson can get open, and no one else does either. So I guess no one knows until Sunday.
John, are you surprised that maybe even shocked that they let Stephon Diggs get away?
Yes, but they probably look at it from a different perspective where here's a player of X age making this much money. I don't ever want to get rid of productive Pro Bowl level players for rookies because Diggs puts up 1,000-yard seasons without blinking, and the next guy hasn't caught a pass yet. So, as a fan, you look at it one way, and I think from a business standpoint, maybe they look at it a different way. But, don't give him the contract if you're going to get rid of him after 2 years. And he didn't have any injury problems. So, there was rumors of him being hard to deal with, but what receiver isn't?
Mm-hmm.
It's a diva position, that's for sure.
Yeah, guy gets players get the ball 6 times a game, want to set the tone for the entire offense. But yeah, it's I don't like him being gone. He seemed to also play well against Green Bay for whatever reason.
Yeah, he did. He had a good combination of size and speed, especially speed, and he was one of those later round picks that really turned out to be a great wide receiver. I've interviewed Adam Thielen, and he's probably the one guy in all my 42 years of interviewing players, he's probably the least person you would predict that he's a football player. He looks like your next door neighbor or your daughter's boyfriend or something, or just a good guy that showed up. But what a player.
Yeah, they caught lightning in a bottle there from getting a guy out of a tryout camp who most teams didn't even know he existed. And, it's a great success story, that's for sure. And he had an injury problem last year, but overall he's been very durable. And, the question is, can he be the number one guy? And, that people need to find out with Diggs not around.
Talk about the offensive line, if you could.
I'd rather not. It was marginally better last year. For the Cousins bashers out there, I mean, half of his throws are with people draped all over him and, untouched from the outside, but they were better last year than the year before. And again, with no preseason, a rookie named Ezra Cleveland probably would have earned a starting job this year at guard because Pat Elflein has really had a tough time of it. But, they can only take so many chances, I think, without knowing who can play. So Elflein's going to hold on for a little while longer. The right tackle is really good, Brian O'Neill. Center's a 2-year guy. He's not bad, but this is not the strength of the team. And speaking of what dads always say, my dad only cared about the offensive lineman getting drafted. He could care less about anybody else. So we'll see what happens. Definitely not where they're going to make their money, but hopefully it gets better.
There's a Packer killer at tight end, Kyle Rudolph. That guy's taking a step up, it seems like, every year. They gave him a big contract. He deserved every penny.
I've always wondered why they didn't use him more too. I think he's a really good target and can do things after the catch. I think he's, as you point out, he's a great player. Irv Smith, who plays behind him, because they do play a lot of two tight ends, and Irv Smith, I think, is going to have a really good year this year. Whether he starts on Sunday, I don't know, because nobody knows anything. But I'd watch for Irv Smith. I think he's going to come on.
Don Matovich, we've got a Packers expert in JD here. We've got John Kane, the Vikings aficionado, if you will. Any questions for either one of these two as it relates to the big game on Sunday?
As John has been saying, even though he's a Viking fan, no one knows what's going to happen this Sunday. No one knows. I've had guys call me and go, what do you think the chances are the Packers are favored to beat the Vikings, or are the Vikings favored to beat them? What do you think? And I said, how can anybody answer that question? As John just said, nobody knows what's going to happen. But maybe what they should do in the NFL is the same thing the coach from the Miami Heat did. The coach from the Miami Heat seen a young kid from Wisconsin. That kid's helping them in the playoffs. Maybe they take that offensive lineman, even though they haven't had training camp, or up there they did do some hitting, and maybe they could put him in and take a chance with him, and maybe he works out better than what's there. So maybe he replaces that offensive lineman, and he take a chance. He played college football. He got drafted. If they do their job and they coach him well enough, unless they want to protect him and give him a year to get worked in, but at this point, nobody knows which team is going to win. Nobody knows who's going to really play their best game. I wouldn't want to say that the Packers are going to win. I wouldn't want to say the Vikings are going to win because none of us know. So it'll be
Tyler Hero drop, right? From Whitnall High School, Miami Heat, and Eric Spoelstra's team eliminating those Bucks in 5 games. I like it, Don.
Well.
Let me ask if I may. Go ahead, Don.
That's the thing, Tom, that I was trying to say is, as John said earlier, he said they found a gem in the rough. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew this kid was a really good football player, and he's a pro tight end now. It's sometimes when the scouts look at ball players, they have different ways of looking. And here's how I could say that. At Carroll College, when I coached the defensive line there, we had some guys that played, and a scout, he recognized a kid from Martin Luther King High School who was a wide receiver. Nobody ever even heard of him. Division III football. He got drafted. He got a chance to play. Dave Weber from Menominee Falls, Oakland Raiders, Miami Dolphins. He was a quarterback from Division III. There's no Division III quarterback coach that can teach a kid to play or be ready to be in a locker next to Howie Long with the Oakland Raiders. So, this coach from basketball, maybe some of the coaches should take some of that experience that he's showed. You got to let some guys play. If a guy has the ability to play, like if this offensive lineman started in college, who knows what he can do in the pros? And I would just like to say that if you're trying to get to a championship, maybe you want to give that guy a chance. Maybe you want to stick him in there like they did my friend Phil Michek. Here's a guy that played for the Racine Raiders. That's not real football. We were just a bunch of bangers who banged everybody around, and we won national championships. He went up to Minnesota. I can't tell you the coach's name, but the defensive line coach there actually stopped Phil in the middle of practice and said, why are you always running and running and running until the whistle blows and just running all over the place? And he said, because that's how I learned how to play football. And that's why they wanted to offer him a contract. So this offensive lineman might get in there and give you what the offensive line in Minnesota needs. He might give you that boost, and he might be active.
Good point.
John Kane, to that point of the O-line that Don's making, they get rid of that ball quickly, though, with Cousins, don't they? So they make it tough on a Packers D or anybody else to get to him.
Definitely. There's a lot of quick hitting plays, a lot of stuff that comes off play action. They, as you point out, they want it out of there, and hopefully someone else can make a play downfield. That's for sure.
The difference between Cousins and Rodgers in the pocket may not be that much, but when there's a little bit of pass rush and there's mobility. Now Rodgers is slowing down at 36, no question, but he can still make plays and make plays, move, sense where the rush is, and throw on the move. And that's where Cousins is more of the typical quarterback.